Good morning and welcome to the latest instalment of my series of programs about building the DJH A8 kit. And this program we are going to concentrate on pages 7, 8 and 9, which is the commencement of building the body and to a certain extent detailing it. So that's page 7, which is the basic superstructure and some footplate details at the front. Page 8, which is more detailing specifically to do with the lubricator gear, and page 9, which is also further detailing and the bunker and various stuff to do with that. Because of the length of time that this will take, this will probably consist of a number of parts, depending on how much I can do in the time that I've got available. So before we start, if you remember the last program, we built the footplate to go on the chassis. Now I was a bit remiss, because what I should have done as part of that program is that I should have showed you fitting the footplate on the chassis. Now a couple of things have come all too painfully obvious to me from actually trying the footplate on after, and I need to sort of point these out now, although it may be a little bit too late now, but and I will, at the end, once the locomotive is finished, I will do a separate program about the snags and everything that I came across while I was doing this. But being that and what it is, so I just need to point out a few things to you before we go any further with the bits that I've just said. So if you remember, in the when you built the footplate, there is a slot with a nut at the rear and a raised portion, these two portions here, which locate the cab. The reason for the slot in the chassis is now pretty clear. The slot is for the motor to pass through. Now if you remember, I've got an ABC gearbox with a Maxon motor that doesn't fit through the slot, and it doesn't fit through the slot to the extent that I can't make the slot bigger, because it will remove this bit on the end. So after a bit of juggling and everything around with it, I've found that if you tilt the motor forward so that it's like that, you can get the chassis on at an angle and then seat it. It was also came pretty obvious that the bit at the front, the valve gear way shaft, you remember the casting with the two hammers on, if that is not soldered completely centrally, and the end of the casting which fits through the two etch supports on the chassis is not filed virtually flush, or in fact it has to be filed flush with those etchings, this bit will not fit through the gap between, let alone the frames. It doesn't matter how close you put the frames, remember they need to fit the width of the smokebox saddle. It is still necessary to skim off probably a thickness of the material on the inside to just get that through. I found it necessary, you may not, but if it doesn't fit, don't force it. Just keep skimming off the inside of the chassis between the chassis frames until it fits over nicely. The other thing that I found that I had to do was the rear and the front of the chassis. They're pretty tight fit on the chassis with the buffer beams. It was necessary to make sure that any etching cusps that you may or may have left on, they need to be removed. So I've removed them, and it does fit okay now. And also where the valence fits over the cylinders, so let's turn it around so there's a bit of light from the window here, that's also a very tight fit, and it's necessary to make sure that the inside of the valence, if you remember, I used turned rivets for the valence detail. That rear surface needs to be perfectly smooth, otherwise it will not fit over the cylinders. But I went use one of my wife's ubiquitous nail files, filed it down, got rid of all the solder, got rid of any projections of the rivets, and that does fit over now. So you may find that when you've built the foot plate, that test it on the chassis, make sure that it fits, and again, don't force it on, remove material gently and in the smallest amounts that you can manage, using a needle file or a nail file or whatever your chosen method is. Remove it bit by bit until it fits nicely, but whatever you do, don't force it on, because you will distort some of the details that you've fitted on the chassis, and you don't want to do that. So I shall put this aside now and talk to you about the body. Now, the DJH A8 kit, as I mentioned at the start, sorry, I've got to rearrange Boris's legs, otherwise I'll hurt him. The DJH kit does cater for a number of variations. This particular one, the Diagram 6363A boiler, there were quite a few when they were converted that retained a lot of the details from the H1, the NERD class 444. Now, it is necessary for you to decide whatever period you are going to model. You will need to do your research, because there were quite a few variations, and a lot of these variations are catered for in the kit. So with that in mind, my initial photograph, which I showed you back in program 1, which is a photograph of my chosen locomotive 69875 in the appropriate time period. I've blown it up to A3 at work. Luckily it was a high definition photo, so I've blown it up to A3 size and laminated it so it doesn't become damaged, and I can see quite a few of the pertinent variations to detail that I'm going to need for the coming parts from this photograph. Down here, the manifolds for the lubrication, they're slightly different on this locomotive. I've looked at probably any number of A8 photographs on the internet and in books and everything, and this is the only one that I can see which has this strange arrangement here, but it's only on this side. I've found another photo of this locomotive from the other side, and that has the standard arrangement, so I'm going to cater for that when I build it. As far as I can see from the instructions, DJH don't cater for this particular item here, which you can probably just see. That's the vacuum ejector drain cock, and I'm going to make that up when I fit the boiler, but we'll come to that a bit later. From the photo you can see that the locomotive has a cage. I know that it had the hopper top removed, So at this period, so I will do that when I do the bunker. A little bit more difficult to see from this particular photo are the variations for the windows. There are three, well, there are two possible, well no, there are three possible variations that you can have with the windows, and I've looked at other photos and I will go with what I've seen in the other photos rather than this. It's a bit of a sort of a high contrast area, so you can't really see what the front windows are like. The whistle, there's a number of variations that you can have with the whistle, and you can clearly see that this is a single whistle, upright. It's mounted on an isolating valve in the firebox, so that's pretty simple. That's catered for in the kit. Like I said, it's got vacuum. Originally some of them were Westinghouse only, some of them were dual fitted. Most by this time there was something called the Unification of Brakes program, and this is vacuum fitted, so that will be catered for in the kit, and by my assembly. Now, moving on to details that you can't see. If I get the two parts, if I can find the other part, there it is. The DJH, let me move a bit closer. DJH supply you two pre-curved bunker ends. Very nice. This one, which you maybe, let's get it in a bit of a contrast, there you go. Right, if you notice that there is one slot there, one slot. This one, which I've already prepared, this one has two slots, take my word for it. The second one is there, you can probably just about see them. What this is that in 1945 the LNER added a second footstep to the rear of the bunker. So anything that you're going to build which is in BR period, this is the one that you should use, the one with the two rear footsteps, not the one with the single footstep. This is for up to 1945. Also, there are a number of, on the main etches, there are a number of, this is the front, the cab front. This one and this one are the cab rear, but also this one is the cab rear. These basically cater for the multiple types of bunker that you can have. The one with the small window cutouts, like these two here, they're for the cage, whether it was or wasn't fitted with a hopper. And the one with the larger windows, this one, is for one with a standard 3-rail bunker, which also comes as part of the kit, but it's a casting. Only 3, from what I can gather from what I've read, only 3 were fitted in BR days with a 3-rail bunker. Most of them were fitted with the cage, or the cage with or without the bunker, without the hopper top. So again, you need to look through and find out what your chosen prototype, the arrangement was, and then take it from there. What I've done before I started shooting, I've prepared the sides, the various parts. There are a number of locations which have got half-etch holes where you need to use your chosen method of depicting rivets. Like I said, I use 5.5mm turned brass rivets. That part's got 8 on. This one's got 2. This part here has got 6, 8, 10. This part here, the bunker front, has got 12, and the tender rear has got loads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 28. It's got 32 on the bunker rear. Also, before I crack on with putting it together, the cab front, if you look on the rear of the cab front, there are, so if we get some up here, there are some half-etched details with a second concentric circle around them. There's also one here and one on the other side. They are basically holes that you need to drill depending on what version you're going to build. So what I've done is I've opened up a hole on this side just above my finger, 1.6 millimeters, and that's for the vacuum ejector pipe. The hole on the other side is 0.7 millimeters, which is for the steam takeoff for the brakes. That goes in the other side of the cab, and I've left the 3 in the middle because they're not needed on the version that I'm building, but they are to do with whistle variations and other pipes which aren't particular, well, they're not pertinent to the version that I'm building. So what we're going to do, we'll remove the footplate off the chassis that we built earlier, and we will start to put the various superstructure parts on the chassis. I won't bother with any detailing particular at the moment, depending on how much time I have. So I'll go away now, I'll show you what I've done, and I'll explain to you the various stages. There are quite a few bends that need to be made in the sides, and there are certain bends that you need to be quite careful of because they're relatively delicate. So I'll go away, I'll start putting the sides on, and then I'll show you what I've done. So I've been away, as I promised, and I've done started folding the sides up. Now, as I expected, there are a number of things with this that could catch you out. You need to bend. There's a right angle half etch bend for the cab returns. The tabs are for the doors, but I'm not going to bother with those at the moment. These need bending first, I think, but there is a little bit of a downside to that. You can't really bend them neatly afterwards, otherwise you end up with distorted sides, because you can't use a hold and fold if everything else is bent. The problem with doing these first is that you may be able to see that rectangular piece that sits in the bottom of the etch, and it actually holds it rigid. As you can see now, it's a little bit floppy and it is quite delicate. What I did is I folded the front bit first, and I had to resort to pliers to do the rear bit, although I did do one with a hold and fold. If you've got a small hold and fold, the only one that I've got available at the moment is this huge one. Number 2 son's borrowing the smaller one, so I can't use it at the moment. So I've bent all this up. It's quite easy to try a dry run with your bits and pieces, as it's all slot and tab. So there's the cab fitted on. You don't have to bend over the tabs first, but I would advise you, if you do this, to try a dry run before you commit to soldering anything. All I've done with regards soldering is that I've put a fillet down this right angle bend. I've bent over the cab handrail supports and put a fillet of solder on those. Another note of caution, they are very, very delicate, so please, if you do these, as soon as you bend them, put a fillet of strengthening solder on, otherwise they'll easily break off. One of mine did, so I had to resort to a pair of pliers. I haven't put it on very straight, so I'm going to have to go back and do it a bit later, but they are very delicate and easy to break off. Tack soldered the inside of the tank tops just to keep it in a relatively good shape, so it doesn't flop around everywhere. Once this is on the foot plate, it is easy enough to get back underneath to solder it properly. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go away, I'm going to start fitting these parts. Sorry, oh, there's one other thing that I needed to mention. The rear bunker has got two tabs. They may not be, hold it again, there are two tabs, one there and one there. They fit in the slot, the two slots at the rear, but the thing is that those slots are right in line with the buffer beam. So the tabs, as they come, see, that's the other part that I've not used, it doesn't seat all the way down. You may be able to see that there is a gap. So what I've done, I've reduced the height of the tabs by sort of a metal thickness, and now they do sit in, tabs sit in nicely, and they do give a tight seal to the bottom of the foot plate. Need a little bit of dressing just to get rid of some of the etching tabs and everything else like that. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go away, start fitting the bits, and then I'll come back and show you what I've done and let you know of any pitfalls that I've come across while I'm doing this particular task. So here we go, we now have our basic shape, and that is actually 6 parts. So you have the bunker rear, the sides, which are all one part, the cab rear, the cab front, and yet again another side. Now how I did this is that I actually connected the bunker sides to the cab front. If you can probably see or not, there are 2 tabs down the bottom. There we go, down the bottom, one there, one there. They fold over, they're like the large tabs for the front framing. I found it, after doing a couple of dry runs, I found it easier to connect the 2 bunker sides to the cab front to keep it as all one part, because then you get the correct spacing at the front. I've tack soldered along the bottom of the tanks, across the top of the tanks to the cab front, and the bottom of the cab front to the foot plate. Also, if you remember from the start of the foot plate, there are 2 upright parts. Well, they're conveniently exactly the right space apart. There's the rear one. They're exactly the right space apart for the width of the cab, and provided that you have got those at a nice 90-degree angle, you can use those to get the cab front and the cab back vertical. They also support it to a certain extent as well. So what we have is, we have the cab front, there are 2 tabs that go through the foot plate, and the cab rear the same. There are 2 tabs that go through the foot plate. I've not soldered the cab rear ones yet. What you need to do is you need to make sure that everything is fully seated on what it rests on, and try and keep the distance down at each side consistent. If you remember, I said that only that small bar there actually holds the sides apart, so they flex a bit. Once they're fitted either side of the cab front and the cab rear, they don't move as much, and everything lined up nicely. So like I said, I've tack soldered in certain places the bunker tops, the tops of the rear cab, the tanks on the front of the cab front, the bottom of the cab front, down there. I've also done the tabs front and back, and soldered along the front. Now that I'm happy that it all fits together, I'll go along and make the joints more permanent, and that will be just about that for today. What I will do is I will carry this on in another part at a later date. It's taken me quite a while to do this. The preparation of the bunker, putting all the rivets on and doing this, has taken about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So what I'll do is I'll go away, finish off this with the soldering. Oh yes, sorry, quickly before I forget, keep forgetting, the bunker rear needs to line up with the curves, the edge curve in the rear of the side. It didn't quite match up, so you might need to bend it. I think there was about 1mm difference. This bit was higher than the side, so you might need to manipulate that. But it's like most things with stuff like this, you need to keep checking your work all the time, make sure it's not flexing, make sure everything is in line, and then you should get a nice consistent finish. So I'm going to go away, going to solder everything up now. That will be the end of this particular program, and when we come back we will start adding the details, because now we've got something to work with. Okay, so thank you for watching, and watch out for the next video, which will probably be around next weekend, because I'm back on day shift starting tomorrow, and I've got a night shift at the end of the week, so next week is completely taken up with work, so I won't be able to do anything until the week after. But if you're interested in this, keep an eye out for it, and I'll keep the programs coming. Thank you for watching.